Thank you for joining me for another video. Last week we saw the aftermath, well, part of the aftermath of the flood. This would be the Great Flood for those of you just now tuning in. The flood involving Noah and his family. And this week we're also going to be talking a little bit about the aftermath. Last week we actually talked about the 7 Noahide laws, seven laws or 7 categories of laws, I should say, that are incumbent upon all humanity. For those of you who are on the younger side, that means we all are required to do them. Okay, and I'm speaking specifically to my children and any of their friends who may be watching. This week we are going to similarly talk. We're going to talk around them, I guess you should say. We're not really going to talk about the 7 Noahide laws as much as we're going to bring up something that the passage does that kind of goes along with it, you know, if you think of it in really sort of a broad kind of way. And anybody who's familiar with the story is just like, listen, I didn't get where we got the 7 laws from, and now you're saying we got something else that goes along with it. What? Let's jump into it. Let's just go ahead, and it's much easier if I just tell you. So, this is Genesis chapter 9, and we're going to be reading today verses 8 through, 17? Vayomer Elohim el Noah velbano ito lemor. So God said to Noah and to his sons with him. It's important to note here, and this is just kind of a side note in this video, but in the Midrash it actually makes up an entire teaching, that God is speaking here, first of all in his capacity as a judge, because again we're using the name Elohim, but also God is speaking not just to Noah this time, he's speaking to his sons as well. So the Midrash makes that into sort of a big deal. I'm not, but you know, it is kind of a big deal. You know, for those of you who are like, oh, one man, God spoke to one man, there were others, he couldn't speak to them as well. Well, here he speaks to 3 other men, which happened to be all the men that were there at the time. So, God said to Noah and to his sons, saying, Wa'ani hineni meqim et berithi idchem وَإِذْ زَرْعَخَمْ أَحَرَيْهِمْ. So he says that as for me, remember this is this is just finishing up with last week, where God was just telling them, you know, be fruitful, multiply, you know, have babies, have fun, fill the earth, but most importantly, have babies. That is actually repeated multiple times all throughout from the creation account until now. You know, the whole be fruitful, multiply, have babies, that sort of thing. But here he says, and as for me, he says, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your children after you, or with your seed afterward, or your offspring afterward, or after you, I should say. It really kind of depends on who's translating and why they're translating it that way. Ve'eth kol nefesh haya asher idchem, and also all of the animals that are with you, ba'of, Bavehema, yeah, I was right the first time. Bavehema, uvechal hayat ha'ares idchem, mikal yoseh hateva lechol hayat ha'ares. So he says that it's not just with you that I'm making this covenant, but with every living soul, or with every nefesh haya is like the soul that lives. So in this case, it doesn't necessarily just refer to the human soul, but also, as we're going to see in the rest of this verse and throughout the rest of this passage that we're reading today, it refers also to the animals' souls. So those of you who say that no, not all dogs go to heaven, okay, you've got a leg to stand on, right? Those of you who say no, all dogs go to heaven, and for those of you who don't get the reference, you're too young. There was a movie back in the late 80s, early 90s. Good movie from what I remember. I don't know, I was a kid. Okay, good kids movie though. Great family movie called All Dogs Go to Heaven. So for those of you who say that animals don't go to heaven, and for those of you who say that, yeah, they do, okay, both of you have a leg to stand on, because we know that animals, they have a soul. Why? Because this verse specifically says it. The soul of all that lives with you, that is with you, from the birds and the behemah, the domesticated animals, and all the wild animals, let's call them, of the earth, that are with you, from everything that left out of the ark, and to, well, not and, there is no and here, to every hayat ha'aris, every beast of the land. I guess we could translate it that way. That seems reasonable enough. What is this? Verse 11. V'hakimoti et berithi itchem v'lo yikareth v'lo yikareth kol basar od mimeh hamabul. So he says here that listen, I am confirming this covenant with you, or my covenant with you. I will not again cut off all flesh again with the flood waters. ולא יהיה עוד מבול לשחת ha'aretz, and I will not destroy the land again with the flood. Verse 12. Vayomer Elohim, God said, Zot oth haberith asher ani nothen beni uvenechem uven chal nefesh haya asher itchem ledoroth olam. So he says, this is a very important verse here. It says that God said, this is the sign of my covenant, or a sign of the covenant, I guess. There is no definite article here. So it is just, this is a sign of the covenant that I am giving to you between, or that I'm giving between me and between you and between all living souls. This is referring again to the animals that are with you. The Doroth Olam, okay, so a dor is a generation, Doroth is generations. Ledoroth literally means two generations, meaning two as in toward, not two as in the number two. So it's, he's saying that basically to generations forever, I guess, is maybe a good translation. What he's getting at here is, listen, I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to wipe out the whole country again. I will always preserve a remnant. and that's actually important in the history of Israel. We've been persecuted, we've been massacred, we've been well over decimated, but God still keeps a remnant of us. I think that's probably dates back to this. God's not going to completely wipe out anyone unless they themselves wipe themselves out, or if they help their own destruction. That's my speculation that I added on there, but the idea is that from now until eternity, God is not, from then, I guess I should say, until eternity, God is not going to flood the entire land again, the entire country again. Again, I'm not, I don't feel that earth applies here, that the word Ares, I don't think that it applies to the entire planet of earth here. Because again, it's a regional flood, at least in my understanding and according to everything we know, scientifically, historically, archaeologically. Where are we? Verse 13. إذ قشتي نثرتي بعنا وحيث لأوث بريث بني وفم هa'aris. And then God says, the bow I have placed in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and between the earth, or between the land, or between the country. Okay, this is the word Aris again, so it is kind of, could refer to a specific region, it could refer to the entire planet. In this case, I would be okay with applying it to the whole planet, but really I think that it specifically was intended for the region. But notice, before God made the covenant with Noah and his sons, right? Then with their children after them, then with all the animals, then now we're seeing that he's making this covenant also with the land. I think that's interesting. That's very important, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. Briefly, but we will talk about it. Verse 14, وَهَيَّا بَغَنَّنِي غَنَّان الْهَارِسِ وَنِرَثَا هَقَشِث بَغَنَّان. So he says here that it's going to happen that I'm going to place a cloud over. I lost my spot. I'm going to place a cloud over the earth, and he says, I'm going to see the bow in the cloud. This is an important part. God is causing this cloud to come over the earth, or the land, if you prefer. But he's causing this cloud to come over, and he's going to place his bow. Now, everybody, okay, everybody, when you think of this, everybody, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, doesn't matter who, anyone who's just reading this story in whatever language they're reading it, is going to conclude he's talking about a rainbow, okay? There's no disagreement. I don't think that there is a single person on the planet who could read this and read the word bow, which normally is a weapon of war, or I guess, if you're into archery, that sort of thing. But I think that everyone reads this story and they're like, oh, this is clearly a rainbow. Okay, it's the same word for both, just like in English. Yeah, so I will see my bow in the cloud, or the bow, the rainbow in the cloud. וזכרתי את בריתי אשר ביני וביניכם ובין כל נפש חיה בכל בשר ולא יהיה עוד מים למבול לשחט כל בשר. And so he says that, and I will remember after seeing this rainbow, what a weird thing to say, that I will remember my covenant that is between me and between you and between all the living souls. This is referring again to the animals. And bechol basar, and the that's in the flesh. And there will never again be water to flood and destroy all flesh, he says. وحيث حقشت بعنان أريثها لذكور بريث عולם بين إلهim وبين כל נפש חיה בכל בשר אשר על הארץ. And so he says here that listen, this bow, this rainbow will be in the cloud, it'll be in the sky, and he says, I'm going to look at it and I will remember this eternal covenant between God. Interesting, God speaking of himself in the third person. I will remember this covenant between God and all the living souls that are in all flesh that are on the earth. وَيُمَرْ Elohim el Noach, and God said to Noah, Zoth oth haberith asher hakimothi beni uven kol basar asher al haaretz. And so God says to Noah, this is a sign of the covenant that I am confirming between me and all flesh that's on the earth. So I hope you learned something. I'm just kidding. Let's talk about it for a minute, okay? There's not really a whole lot going on in this passage, but I did want to sort of hover on it and focus on this rainbow, okay? A lot of people, look at a rainbow and they think, oh, that's pretty, because it is pretty. Let's be fair, okay? It is pretty. And some people, particularly in Christian traditions, they'll look at a rainbow and they'll say, it's a reminder of God's covenant or something to that effect. In Judaism, we don't look at it like that, specifically because of what it says here. God said, I'm going to put my bow, my rainbow, in the cloud, and so that whenever I look at it, I'll remember my covenant that I'm making with all of you, and I won't kill you. Obviously paraphrased for emphasis here, but God is saying, listen, this is a sign of my covenant, so that every time I see it, I'll remember that I promised you I wouldn't destroy you again. Okay, so in Judaism, it's not really seen, it is seen as a blessing, obviously, but it's not seen as a good sign. We're prohibited in the Torah from reading omens, in everything. Okay, I can't, count crows or ravens outside my window and say, oh, 6 ravens. Oh, something bad is going to happen today. I can't do that. The Torah forbids it. Okay. Also, how would I get that? Six ravens. Oh, something bad's gonna happen. Why six? What if it was only five? What if it were, seven? What if only one raven? But also, we're not allowed to look at the rainbow and take it as an omen, either good or bad. But we are to remember that God already told us it was a bad thing if we see this rainbow. Okay? Why is it a bad thing? Well, because it reminds us that God is honoring his covenant. Well, why would that be a bad thing? If God is honoring his promise that he made with us, why would that be a bad thing to remember? Well, because of the conditions of the covenant. Okay, I'm going to put my bow in the cloud so that whenever I look at it, I will remember my covenant. In other words, you deserve to be destroyed. You deserve to be completely wiped out, but I swore to you by myself that I wouldn't do that. God put limits on himself. I like that. It's one of my favorite questions that people ask is, can God make a rock so big he can't lift it? Can he make a forest so dense that he gets lost in it and can't find his way out? Well, that's just silly, okay? First of all, what a stupid scenario, okay? Secondly, God exists within whichever limits or lack thereof he sets for himself. Here, he's giving us a covenant. He's saying, listen, this covenant, which, by the way, is entirely on God, okay? We have no real part in it. We can't influence his decision one way or another because he already swore to us, listen, I'm not going to do this again. It's a bad idea. Well, it wasn't a bad idea. It was just a bad thing. It was not not the sort of thing that you want to teach your children about, and yet we do anyway, which may be quite silly of us. But God places his rainbow in the clouds so that he has a sign there that we should be destroyed. We're guilty because human beings. We are. I told someone recently, and by recently I mean in the last year or so, that he is exactly the way God made him, which is exactly the same way that God made everyone else. He's perfectly imperfect. Okay? And we are. We're absolutely imperfect. And that's something that's probably not going to change as much as we may want it to. Okay? For those of you who are perfectionists, okay, lighten up a little bit. No need to be crazy about everything. Okay, it's all going to eventually work out the same way in the end. It might take a little longer, but ultimately, if it was meant to be, it will be. If it's not meant to be, maybe it won't be. Okay, that's just the way that it is. The Tower of Babel, which we're going to be getting into in a few weeks. It wasn't meant to be, so it wasn't. Flood, that was absolutely meant to be, and so it was. Okay. Now, that's a wonderful discussion on the hypothetical. I'm not saying, by the way, that everything is preordained. I'm not, because I don't believe that everything is preordained. I'm not a Calvinist within the Jewish tradition, if that's possible. I don't think it is possible. I'm not trying to say that predestination is a real thing. What I am saying is that some things absolutely are preordained. Some things are not preordained. Some things are specifically preordained to not happen. That was a wild rabbit trail to chase. Okay, so let's talk about the rainbow for a second, right? You look at a rainbow and you see it's got this arch, right? Okay, so it doesn't really have an arch. I don't think I'm spoiling anything for those of you who maybe are not up to up to date on your, Scientific Monthly or whatever scientific journals you might read, might not read, probably don't read. Most people don't read, okay? Scientific journals anyway. So I don't think that I'm, sharing classified information with you here, but the rainbow itself doesn't actually curve. It's just a refraction of the light shining through it like a prism. It separates white light into, 7 different colors of the rainbow. But you look at the shape of it from our perspective, and it's shaped in an arch. It is a bow, very much like like the type that's used for archery. Okay, but it's angled upward. Okay, so I'm going to give you a metaphor. This should not be taken as this should not be taken literally. This is a metaphor, okay? If we say that the rainbow is an actual bow, a pesheth, right, for warfare, for destruction, if we say that it's God's bow, look at how it is. Look at how it's oriented. It's away from us. Okay, it's as if God's looking at it, and, like he finished with the destruction. Then he hung his bow on the wall, angled upward, so that he would remember, I just can't kill them all, because I made this deal with them. I made this promise to them. Okay, and I think that's a beautiful picture. It's a beautiful image to keep in your mind. And let me take a look at my notes right quick, because it's not just for humanity. The text tells us over and over and over again that this covenant is between God and animals and the earth. Okay? All of creation is included. And this really tells us a very interesting... I'm just going to leave them on because I'm going to be consulting it. This really tells us something else about the sin that led to the flood in itself, which was violence, okay? It was Hamas, because God is political that way. It tells us that this sin of human violence corrupts the world around us. That God had to make a covenant with the earth and the animals and with humanity tells us that no matter what we do, because again, it's in our power. We were the ones who screwed it up in the first place, right? We were the ones who were violent. And by we, obviously, I don't mean we, us. I mean, like we, us, like we, humanity, okay? But not like us. Surely we're more evolved than that, right? But have you ever seen a rainbow? Because if you have, it's not there to marvel at. I mean, it certainly is something to marvel at. It's not something to marvel at, though. It's not something to look at and say, ooh, so pretty, or ooh, look, the reminder of God's covenant. It's not a reminder to us of God's covenant with us. God said it's a reminder to Him. So if we see a rainbow, we should bear in mind we deserve, as a collective we, I'm not saying, if you see a rainbow, you're a terrible person. I'm not saying that. I mean, maybe you are. I don't know. I don't know, every single person that's watching, but, well, not that I'm aware of anyway. But if you see this rainbow, it's a sign that we as humans, as a species, we deserve judgment. But God's being merciful. He's remembering His covenant. Obviously, God doesn't forget, so it's not like He's going to need to be reminded. But He's teaching us etiquette, I guess. If you promise you're going to do something, you should set up reminders to remind you that that you swore to do it. Okay. Consulting my notes. So if God restrains his destructive power, we should as well. If God enters a covenant with all life, okay, even with the earth itself, well, then we also have an obligation from our perspective, to honor it. We need to be careful with life, and by life I mean, your fellow human, animals, and since God made the covenant also with the earth, I would argue the environment as well. Okay, we do have an obligation to, at the very least, preserve our natural environment. Remember, I mean, we only got one Earth. I'm not gonna, go all eco-warrior on you or anything fun like that. But we've only got one planet so far. As far as I'm aware, there are no humans out in space anywhere, unless, I don't know, the Stargate is real. I don't know. Okay, for those of you who haven't seen the movie and following series, plural of series, of Stargate, it's a fun science fiction franchise. I highly recommend it. I love it. Yeah, so the rainbow, if you notice, the rainbow appears after the storm, never during the storm. The rainbow in the text appears only after the flood, not during the flood. Maybe it appeared during the flood as well, we don't know. But neither did Noah. Noah didn't see it either. So, from our perspective, it was just after the storm, after the flood, after the destruction. That's when this rainbow was visible to humanity, instead of during it. Notice how the rainbow doesn't appear instead of the destruction. It doesn't appear in place of the flood. Judgment exists. Okay, suffering exists. Okay, it's a fundamental law of nature. And yes, God absolutely set that law in motion. Okay, God absolutely said, without suffering, there's no joy. Without judgment, there's no mercy. Okay. It's one of those paradoxes of just the human experience in general, of life in general. Without darkness, there can be no light. Without less good things, I don't want to say bad, because that's all God's creations, and everything that God's created is good. Okay? It might not be revealed good, but it's good. Okay? We could not know good without things that are not so good. We couldn't know bliss without pain. We couldn't know life without death. It's so certainly judgment exists, suffering exists, death exists. Bad things do exist, but it doesn't have the final word. Okay, you got to remember that when God put His rainbow in the sky, He's saying, no, my mercy is going to have the final word here. I'm not going to wipe them out, no matter how terrible they are, because I promised them that I wouldn't. So my mercy is going to reign over my judgment in this case. So, interesting though, the Talmud teaches us that if you see a rainbow, okay, that you're going to bless God, specifically referring to it as the one who remembers the covenant, okay? Excuse me. This blessing realizing it's not a triumph, you know, it's not a yeah, way to go Hashem for making and remembering this covenant. No, it's a sobering thing. Hey, we deserve destruction. Sometimes. Not all the time, sometimes. But we're blessing God for remembering His covenant, and not, as a friend of mine in high school used to say, and not just smiting us all, you know. That's what you get when you got, so he was very Calvinist. That was just his thing. Everybody was getting smitten left and right. I mean, it was all, like every day it was, you know, I hope God doesn't smite us all. Well, I do too, but come on, dude, like what the heck? Good times, good times. Anyway, so in the portion that we've read today, talking about the specifically the rainbow, God effectively says, listen, the world is going to keep enduring, but what's humanity's role going to be in it? Okay, so if, I like how I worded it here in my notes, so if that's the question, you know, ultimately it's up to us, you know, are we going to live in a way that is worthy of the mercy that we're granted, or not? Are we going to be agents of chaos, which is what led to the flood in the first place, or are we going to be preservers of life? Some might say life preservers. Man, I couldn't resist that one. At least I didn't make a lifesaver joke, okay? Anyway, that's all I've got. So, until next time, which coincidentally is going to be in a couple of days if, you know, if you're keeping up with my videos. So until next time, shalom.